I didn't mean to start a civil war over a boat. Really, I didn't. I just wanted to park it somewhere that didn't cost me $200 a month and didn't come with a side of snobby stares. The boat wasn't even that fancy. It was a 20-year-old fishing boat ID refurbished in my garage over 3 months of YouTube tutorials, busted knuckles, and too many burritos. I'd painted it forest green, named it Mild Peril, and considered it my little floating piece of sanity. When I moved into the ranch property, the real estate listing had called it a private lake. I assumed that meant it was mine. Logical, right? Turns out, private meant shared with a homeowners association that thinks it's a miniature government. I discovered that part the hard way. The morning I backed my truck up to the boat ramp, I was humming and feeling productive. It was the kind of morning that makes you believe the universe approves of your life choices. Birds were chirping. Sunlight sparkled on the lake. The water looked calm enough to reflect my mood. I unhitched the boat, backed it in smoothly, perfect angle, no splash. I was proud. I even took a little video to send my buddy. Then I heard the sound. Excuse me. Excuse me. The kind of excuse me that sounds less like politeness and more like a threat. A woman in tennis whites came speed-walking down the hill toward me, clutching a clipboard like a weapon. Behind her, 2 men in golf polos followed, both wearing mirrored sunglasses and expressions that said, "We own everything you touch." "Hi there," I said, trying for friendly. "Just launching for a little fishing." "You can't do that," clipboard lady snapped. "This is HOA property." I blinked. HOA? I thought the lake came with my lot. "It's a shared amenity," she said, emphasizing the word like she was teaching me English. "Boats must be approved by the lake committee." "Lake committee," I repeated slowly. "That's a thing?" One of the men crossed his arms. "Sir, this is a private body of water maintained by the HOA. Unauthorized motorized vehicles are strictly prohibited." I looked at Mild Peril. "Buddy," I muttered. "They called you unauthorized." Clipboard lady was already scribbling something. "You'll receive a fine for this infraction, and we'll have to contact security." "You have security?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Sir, we got a report of an unauthorized vessel." I gestured to the boat floating peacefully on the water. "There she is, officer. Terrifying, I know." The officer gave me a look that said he'd rather be anywhere else. Technically, they can ask you to move it if it's under HOA management. Clipboard lady folded her arms smugly. "See? You'll need to remove it immediately." I could have argued. I could have gotten mad. But instead, I smiled. The kind of smile that usually means I've just had a very bad or very interesting idea. "Of course," I said cheerfully. "I'll take care of it right now." I pushed the boat back onto the trailer, waved politely, and drove off. But as I turned the corner at the end of the lake road, I noticed a for sale sign half hidden by weeds. It was on a small building that looked like it hadn't seen life since the Reagan administration. The sign said, "Marina Property. Inquire at County Office." Marina Property. Now, I'm not an impulsive man. I usually think before I act, except when someone waves a rulebook in my face. So instead of going home to sulk, I drove straight to the county records office. An hour later, after some friendly conversation and a few pages of paperwork, I learned something delightful. The marina wasn't owned by the HOA. It was a separate parcel of land, and technically, it controlled the lake access ramp. The woman behind the counter smiled when she saw the expression on my face. "You thinking of buying it?" she asked. "I'm thinking of launching a comeback," I said. It took one phone call to my bank, a signature, and the satisfaction of writing a check that started with too many zeros. But by the time the HOA finished patting themselves on the back for restoring order, I was holding the deed to the marina. 30 minutes after they'd called the cops, I owned their lake entrance. When I drove back through the gate, the same group was still standing by the water, clipboard lady holding her ticket book like a sheriff at high noon. "Sir, I told you this area is..." I held up the papers. "Actually," I said, grinning, "this ramp, this dock, they're mine now." She froze. The sunglasses guys looked at each other. "You can't buy the marina," one of them stammered. "I can," I said. And I did. County clerk still printing the receipt. The cop who was still there raised an eyebrow and muttered, "Well, that's a first." Clipboard lady's jaw dropped. "This isn't over," she said, voice trembling. "Oh, it's just getting started," I replied. I looked out over the lake, sunlight sparkling off the waves, and felt a grin spread across my face. The mild peril was still hitched to my truck, waiting patiently. "Now," I said, "let's see how they like it when I start charging dock fees." Owning the marina was like finding the cheat code nobody else knew existed. It wasn't just a dock and a couple of sheds, it was leverage, and I planned to use every inch of it. First order of business, fixing it up. The place looked like it had been abandoned since VHS tapes were still a thing. The dock planks creaked like a haunted house, the boathouse roof sagged in defeat, and one of the signs still said, "Open daily," even though a family of raccoons had taken over the bait freezer. I called up my buddy Frank, part-time contractor, full-time conspiracy theorist. He took one look around and whistled. "Man, this place is rough. But you know, it's got good bones." "That's what every horror movie starts with," I said. Frank grinned. "So what's the plan? You gonna run it as a business?" "Not exactly," I said. "More like a statement." The first thing I did was slap a fresh coat of blue paint on the dock and hang a sign that read, "Welcome to Mild Peril Marina, open to all." The word all was in extra large letters, mostly because I knew it would give the HOA a collective nosebleed. Within a week, I'd cleaned up the shoreline, patched the roof, and installed a couple of benches. The county inspector came by and was so impressed he waived half the reopening fees. "We've been trying to get someone to take care of this property for years," he said. That weekend, I opened the marina officially. It started small, just me, Frank, and a few locals who'd seen the new sign. But word travels fast when something forbidden becomes suddenly legal. By Sunday afternoon, families were picnicking by the water, teenagers were paddleboarding, and kids were feeding ducks like it was Disneyland. And then, of course, the HOA showed up. This time, it was a convoy. 3 SUVs, 1 golf cart, and a small army of people wearing polo shirts in outrage. Clipboard lady, whose name I'd since learned was Denise, marched straight toward me. "Mr. Miller," she said tightly, "you cannot just open a marina without HOA approval." I leaned casually against a post. "Sure I can. It's private property. Mine, specifically." She blinked. "But the lake is accessible through my ramp," I said. "If you want to use it, you'll need to sign the access agreement." Her eyes narrowed. "Access agreement?" I pulled out a neatly printed form. Standard contract, liability waiver, usage fee, $10 a launch, $5 for residents. Gotta keep the lights on somehow. "You can't charge residents to use their own lake." "Denise," I said, smiling, "you charged me a fine for touching the same lake. Seems fair to balance the books." A couple of the onlookers snickered. Denise's face went crimson. "This isn't over," she said, storming back to her SUV. "It's never over with her," Frank muttered. The best part? People loved the place. It became a local hangout almost overnight. Retirees fished off the dock, teens played guitar by the water, families brought picnic baskets, even folks from nearby neighborhoods stopped by, especially when I added a small snack shack selling coffee and breakfast burritos. I didn't even need to advertise. The HOA did it for me. Every angry email and official notice they sent became free marketing. Word spread. There is a guy who beat the HOA and turned their lake into a public spot. A month later, I got a letter from Denise marked urgent. "Dear Mr. Miller, your continued operation of a commercial marina violates community ordinances and poses a threat to property values. Cease operations immediately or face legal action. Sincerely, the Lakeside Ranch HOA." I wrote back, "Dear HOA, thanks for your concern. Property values have actually increased since I cleaned the shoreline. You're welcome. Sincerely, the guy who owns the boat ramp." For a week, silence. Then I noticed something new. Signs around the lake that read HOA members only beyond this point. It would have been funny if it weren't so predictable. So, I responded in kind. I put up my own sign at the marina gate. All are welcome except clipboards. That one became a selfie hotspot. Still, I didn't want a full-blown feud. I actually liked the lake, and most of the residents weren't bad, just tired of the endless rules. So I decided to host a little community gathering. Free BBQ, live music, no speeches. Frank grilled burgers, kids ran around with glow sticks, and the air smelled like freedom and charcoal. And right in the middle of it all, Denise appeared again, this time without her clipboard, but with a look that could curdle milk. She stood there for a while, arms crossed, watching as her own HOA members laughed and danced on my dock. Finally, she walked up to me. "This is technically unauthorized," she muttered. "Technically delicious, though," I said, handing her a burger. She hesitated, then, shockingly, took it. For a brief, shining moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, we'd reached détente. Then she took a bite, frowned, and said, "You don't have a permit for this grill, do you?" "Denise," I said gently, "don't make me buy the food truck next." By the time summer rolled around, the Mild Peril Marina was the most popular spot within 20 miles. Families booked picnic tables, locals rented kayaks, and someone even proposed on the dock one evening under fairy lights. It was everything I'd dreamed of, peaceful, lively, and completely outside HOA control. Naturally, that meant it was also everything Denise hated. The HOA wasn't taking their loss quietly. I started getting official-looking envelopes weekly. Each one was stamped with red letters like "Final Notice" or "Cease and Desist." It was adorable, really, like they were sending love letters written in lawyer. One morning, I found a notice taped to my marina gate in bold caps: "Illegal commercial operation, subject to HO review." I sighed, peeled it off, and replaced it with a handwritten sign: "Legal successful operation, subject to smiles and sunshine." By that afternoon, someone had posted a photo of it on Facebook. It got 2,000 likes and a comment section full of locals cheering me on. My favorite one said, "This guy's living every HOA resident's dream." But the HOA had an ace up their sleeve, a lawyer. A week later, I was invited to a mandatory hearing at the community clubhouse. The letter was worded like a royal summons. "You are hereby required to appear before the board to address violations of the Lakeside Covenant." I showed up wearing a Hawaiian shirt and flip-flops. Frank tagged along, holding a box of donuts. Inside, the board sat in a row behind a long table, looking like judges at a very disappointed talent show. Denise sat in the center, chin lifted like she was about to deliver a TED Talk on passive aggression. "Mr. Miller," she began, "you have flagrantly ignored community guidelines, disrupted the neighborhood, and operated a commercial entity without approval." "Appreciate the feedback," I said, taking a donut. "Want one? They're jelly-filled." The lawyer beside her cleared his throat. "Mr. Miller, the HOA controls the lake and surrounding amenities. Your actions are in direct violation of the covenant." I smiled. "About that, no, it doesn't." The lawyer blinked. "Excuse me?" I slid a folder across the table. "This is the property deed for the marina and associated lakefront access points. Filed and recorded at the county office. You all see here," I flipped a page, "that the original developer separated this parcel from HOA jurisdiction in 1987. Meaning, technically your rules stop about 12 feet from my dock." The lawyer frowned, scanning the papers. Denise looked ready to faint. "So," I continued, "you can regulate your little floating pool noodles all you want, but as far as the ramp and marina go, you've got as much authority as a traffic cone." The room went silent. Frank bit into his donut with perfect comedic timing. "Man," he said around a mouthful, "that's wild." The lawyer coughed. "Well, legally speaking, he's not wrong." I almost felt bad for Denise. Almost. She stood up, trembling with frustration. "You're destroying the order we built here. Property values, quiet enjoyment." "Actually," I said, The county assessor's report last week said property values have gone up since the marina reopened. Turns out people like water access that isn't guarded by clipboards. Someone at the back snorted. That's when Denise made her fatal mistake. She snapped, "This lake was meant for residents only. It's not some public circus." And I replied calmly, "Then maybe you shouldn't have sold the entrance to the circus." That line got quoted for weeks afterward. After the hearing, the HOA tried one last desperate move. They filed a complaint with the county claiming my marina caused noise pollution and unauthorized gatherings. The inspector who came out was the same guy who'd signed off on my repairs. He spent 10 minutes looking around, admired the new picnic tables, and said, "This is one of the cleanest sites I've seen all year." He signed off the inspection report, stamped it approved, and gave me a thumbs up. When the HOA board got the official letter dismissing their complaint, they finally went quiet. Not defeated, just quiet, like a dog that's realized the mailman is bulletproof. That peace lasted about a week. Then one morning, I woke up to find orange cones blocking the road to my marina. A handwritten sign read, "Road closed. Show maintenance." I could see Denise across the street, pretending to water her roses, so I did the obvious thing. I walked over. "Morning," I said cheerfully. "Road work, huh?" "Private maintenance," she said coolly. "Road's HOA property." I nodded thoughtfully. "Got it. Well, I'll just have the county redesignate the access route then." Her eyebrows shot up. "You can't do that." "Denise," I said, pulling out my phone, "I own the parcel at the end of that road, which means I can petition for a public easement. The county loves public access points. They even pay for signage." I took a photo of her cones. "Thanks for giving me the idea." By the following week, the road had shiny new paint lines and a big green sign that said, "Public Marina Access." The HOA had accidentally turned their private street into a county-maintained road. I didn't even have to pay for paving anymore. When Frank saw it, he nearly fell off his chair laughing. "You're like a one-man urban legend," he said. "They're going to tell stories about you in HOA meetings for generations." I grinned. Good. Maybe they'll learn something. That night, I sat on the dock watching the reflection of the moon ripple across the lake. The sound of laughter and music drifted from the picnic tables. The mild peril bobbed gently beside me, its name gleaming in the light. What started as a small act of defiance had turned into a local symbol of freedom. And I wasn't done yet. Because if there's one thing I'd learned about HOAs, it's this: they never quit. But then again, neither do I. The HOA never officially surrendered, but everyone could tell they'd lost. The road closed fiasco had been the last straw. Once the county declared my access road public, half the neighborhood started visiting the marina just to see what all the fuss was about. The other half came because they were tired of being told not to. I didn't even have to advertise anymore. Mild Peril Marina had become a local legend. It wasn't just a place to fish or boat, it was the great HOA escape. People came from all over just to breathe a little freer for an afternoon. We even had a t-shirt made that said, "No clipboards, no drama, just lake." Frank sold them out of a cooler for $10 a pop. By late summer, we were hosting small events every weekend. Barbecue nights, open mic evenings, a floating movie on the water where people sat in kayaks to watch Jaws, ironically, of course. Every event went off without a hitch. Every complaint letter from the HOA went straight into my Denise archives, which was really just a binder labeled drama fuel. Then, one Friday morning, I got a phone call I didn't expect. "Mr. Miller?" a man's voice said. "This is Thomas Bell, chair of the Lakeside Ranch HOA." I sat up. "You're not Denise," he chuckled nervously. "No, she resigned last week." I had to cover my mouth to keep from laughing. "Resigned, huh? That must have been a fun meeting." "Well," he said, "the board's been reviewing things. We realize that perhaps we've been adversarial." "Adversarial," I repeated. "That's a polite word for calling the cops on a boat." He cleared his throat. "Yes, well, we'd like to make amends. Maybe find a way to collaborate?" I leaned back, grinning. Collaborate how? Perhaps the HOA could sponsor community events at the marina, he said quickly. Maybe co-manage cleanup days or family nights. We could, share resources. Translation. They'd lost control and wanted back in. Now I could have rubbed it in. I could have laughed and hung up. But honestly, I'd already won. And winning twice felt like overkill. So I said, sure, Thomas, let's talk about it. That weekend, the HOA board came down to the marina. No clipboards this time, just nervous smiles and store-bought cookies. Frank set up a grill, and we all sat under the shade by the dock. Thomas opened with a rehearsed speech about community harmony and working together for mutual benefit. I listened patiently, nodding at all the right spots. When he finished, I stood up. All right, I said, I'll make you a deal. They perked up. I'll host a lakeside day every month, free for residents, open to everyone. You guys can bring your banners, hand out flyers, whatever you want, but I held up a finger. No enforcement, no citations, and absolutely no clipboards. They exchanged glances. Thomas hesitated, then nodded. Agreed. And just like that, peace was declared. The first lakeside day was wild. The HOA brought a bounce house and branded water bottles. I provided music and barbecue, and the whole neighborhood showed up. Even Denise made an appearance, though she stayed at the edge of the crowd, sipping lemonade and pretending not to be impressed. Kids splashed in the shallows, old-timers swapped fishing stories, and for the first time since I'd moved in, nobody argued about who owned what. By sunset, the lake glowed gold, laughter echoing across the water. I stood on the dock, arms crossed, watching families drift by in paddle boats. Frank came up beside me, holding a burger in one hand and a soda in the other. You know, he said, you might have actually fixed the place. I laughed. Don't jinx it. But he was right. The HOA, the marina, the residents, they'd all somehow balanced out. Turns out all it took was a little paperwork, some elbow grease, and the refusal to let other people's rules ruin a good day on the water. A month later, I got an official-looking envelope again. I groaned, thinking the truce had ended, but when I opened it, there was no threat, just a plaque. In recognition of community improvement and lakefront revitalization, the Lakeside Ranch HOA proudly presents this award to Mr. Miller, owner of Mild Peril Marina. At the bottom, in smaller print, presented with gratitude by former HOA President Denise Collins. I read it twice, smiling. Frank saw it and laughed. Man, you broke her spirit and got her to write you a thank you note. Nah, I said, holding it up to the sunlight. We just finally got on the same boat. The following weekend, I hosted one last surprise for everyone, a full circle party. I parked Mild Peril right in the center of the lake, rigged up a small speaker system, and played old classic rock while everyone floated nearby. The air smelled like barbecue and lake water and victory. When the sun started to dip, I grabbed the mic. Hey folks, I called out, thanks for coming. You know, when I first tried to put this boat in the water, someone called the cops on me. There was laughter and cheers. And now, I continued, I'm pretty sure half the county's here, eating my ribs and jamming to Fleetwood Mac. So I'd call that progress. Frank whooped. Someone launched a firework over the lake. It wasn't planned, but it was perfect. As the sparks rained down, I looked around at the water shimmering under the night sky, at the people laughing, at the once bitter HOA members chatting with the same neighbors they used to fine. And for the first time in a long time, it hit me how simple it all really was. People just wanted to enjoy the lake. No rules, no drama, no clipboards. Just a little peace, a little sunlight, and maybe a boat named Mild Peril bobbing in the reflection. The end.